Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're going to do another front-end libraries project. This is the build a JavaScript calculator. This is quite a big one. Our objective is to build a CodePen app functionally similar to CodePen to this guy right here. So I'm opening this in a new tab and we see it's just a calculator. 88 minus 8 equals 80. So it's got maybe a display up here and then an equals display down here. I'm not sure if we'll copy that, but it's functionally similar to this is what we're trying to build. So fulfill the below user stories and get all the tests to pass. Give it your own personal style. You can use any mix of HTML, JavaScript, CSS, Bootstrap, Sass, React, Redux, and jQuery to complete this project. You should use a front-end framework like React because this section is about learning front-end frameworks. I consider Bootstrap to be a front-end framework, so I think we'll just use HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and Bootstrap. I think using React is overkill for such a simple project. Additional technologies not listed above are not recommended, and using them at your own risk. We are looking at supporting other front-end frameworks like Angular and Vue, but they are not currently supported. We will accept and try to fix issues reports that use the suggested technology stack of this project. Happy coding! So the calculator should have a clickable element containing an equal sign with the corresponding equals. Okay, and now so what we're going to do with this one is we're going to write it using a text editor. I'm not going to use CodePen like they suggest here. So first off I'm going to open up my terminal and I'm just going to change directories to my desktop. And then I'm hitting tab to fill the, make it autocomplete like that. So now if I list out, you'll see I've just got a few little folders on my desktop. It's mostly clean. And so what we're going to do is going to make a directory. So we're going to make a directory and we're going to call it the JS calculator. Now if I list out my folders, you'll see that there's another one here and we've got our JS calculator. So I'm going to change directories into the JS calculator and list it out. And you'll see when I list it out, there's nothing there. So we're going to touch index.html, which means we're going to create an index.html file. And then we're going to say open index.html. So yeah, I did open index.html, but I want to go open, I want to select the application. So I'm going to go open -a, and then I'm going to go Atom, which is my text editor. So that means I'm opening using the application of Atom. And to do that, I'm going to open index.html. And now it's good because we've got our index.html file open over on this side. And so if I were to open this same file with Google Chrome, so I'm just going to paste this into here. I like to use a incognito window because it makes this project cleaner. So yeah, there's nothing here. So let's add something here. Let's call this, we could just make an H1 element and just say JS calculator. Now if I save my HTML text file and then I come over here and I refresh the page, you'll see we're building a JS calculator, and that's just me opening it and serving it locally. And so yeah, we're good with that. Now what I want to go do is I'm going to go get some Bootstrap, get Bootstrap, and we'll just do it with 4. There's 5 has come out recently, but it's still in beta. And so if you go to the Get Started, I think if you're at the main page, you can go to the Get Started, and then it shows you the quick start. And here's your starter template. And let's just use this starter template to make it easier for us. And I'll just talk through what this all does. So I copy the starter template and paste it in here. And then let's see, I saved it. I don't like how it didn't show up, so I'm just going to reopen it to make it so it looks good on my text editor. And now let's talk about it. This just initializes a document type that says which language it's in. Here's our head in here. This is sets the characters that we use. So it's like this, it's a uniform character code. So it's like making sure the letters are correct. This sets the viewport. So this actually makes it so our thing will become mobile responsive properly. Here we're using a CDN to inject the original CSS. So here we're going to say JS calculator by useful programmer. And now if I were to save this and refresh our page over here, you'll see instead of it saying index .html, it's going to have that JavaScript calculator by Useful Programmer. And you see that the hello world is in a different font now. We'll just put JS calculator right now. Now if I refresh, we've got something there. And then this loads jQuery, so we are using jQuery in this project. And this loads Popper, which I'm not exactly sure what it is. And this loads a minimized version of the Bootstrap JavaScript, which we want to keep as well. So that's good. If we save this, we'll see that it's we've got a beginning. And so if I come back over to here, what we want to do is do test-driven development using their CDN. So I haven't gone through the user stories individually yet, but I will in time. First, here they're talking about immediate execution logic versus formula expression logic. I think I'm going to make it immediate execution logic, which means that this would do 3 plus 5 and then do 8 times 6 and then do 48 minus 2, which would be 46. 46 divided by 4 would be 11.5. So we're going to do it like that. We're not going to make a formulaic algebraic calculator. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to copy this. If you want to build, you can build it by forking this code pen, or you can use the CDN link to run the test in any environment you like. And so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to add our script here. This is for our testing framework. So our S source, and then I'm throwing this guy in there. And then with the script tags, you need to close them. And now if I save this and I come back to our page, I just use Command 3 to tab through these really quickly, and I refresh, we'll see now we have our testing suite. And if we were to go down to here and say our JavaScript calculator, we can run the tests, and we've actually got one test passing so far. We have a mix of HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and you can use whatever framework you like. And so now we're just going to begin what's called test-driven development. So we're going to look at this test, and then we're going to come over here and code up whatever it is that we're missing. Okay, so the first thing we should do is your calculator should contain a clickable element with an equal sign with the corresponding ID of equals. Okay, so the ID of equals, let's make a clickable button. Buttons are clickable. And we want to set the ID set to equal. So ID is equals, and then inside of the button we'll make an equal sign. So if I save the button here, we refresh this page, we've got a clickable button. If we run the tests, cool, we see our first one's passing. That's great and all, but I want to make this within JavaScript, within Bootstrap. So in Bootstrap we have this whole concept of containers and layouts. Content, component, utilities. Looking for this is I've actually just committed this to memory now. So yeah, we have our container. We can do a fluid container, which makes it a full width container or a regular container. And I think we want to do a container fluid because that makes it so that on mobile our JavaScript calculator will take up the whole page. And so yeah, if you're looking for more about that, you can read it here. So here we're going to make we're going to create a div, and we're going to call class is equal to container fluid. And then we're going to close that, over here. And then we can just indent all of this because they're within this guy. So now if I save this and I come back to our calculator and I refresh the page, you'll see, well, it's hard to tell right now, but the equal sign is a little bit off. With the buttons, you can do, well, we can make it a link, and I think an anchor will make it the same thing. It'll still be clickable. And now we'll just add the class for buttons. And then the button classes in Bootstraps, you can look up over here. And so what we'll do is we'll just use these button primary. And then there's also a button block, which makes it so that they fill the page like this. And so we'll go button, and then we'll go button block, and we'll go button primary. And these, it doesn't matter what order these in. You can put CSS classes within here on any organized or any order. So if we save that and we come back over here, we'll see we've got a very large equals button sign. A primary. Okay, and now we're still passing the test. Now, you've seen these before. What I do is I just iterate through and we try to make it so that we get all of the tests passing, and then we can make the calculator look and function the way it's supposed to. So it should have 10 clickable elements containing one number each from 0 to 9 with the following corresponding IDs. So 0 up to 9. So I'm just going to copy all this IDs here, and then I just paste these in, and then we can just go a ID is equal to, and we'll make it equals, and we'll set the class as equal to button. We'll set the class equal to the same as this one. And when we close it, we'll have it set to there. But instead of equals, here we're going to do 0. So I'm going to exit that out and then paste it in here. And then we're going to put a 0 here. And then I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and then so here we're going to go 1, here we're going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And then we'll just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And save the thing and refresh the page. So now we've got buttons for each of these elements. And if I were to drop down this menu and run the tests, we see we're passing another one. We have 10 clickable elements, each containing these numbers. And so that's how we're going to keep doing this. We're just going to keep iterating down, fixing the tests. And then once we've got our passing JavaScript calculator test, then we can just make it look prettier. So it should contain 4 clickable elements, each containing one of the 4 primary mathematical operators and the followings: add, subtract, multiply, divide. All right, well, this is basically here we're basically doing the exact same thing we were doing before. So I'm just going to paste these in here, and I'm going to duplicate this for add, subtract, multiply, and divide. But actually, before I do that, let's make these maybe secondary buttons. Now, if you go over here, you can see the secondary buttons have a different color. They have a gray color. Maybe we should call these ones, yeah, we can call them secondary for now. So add, subtract, multiply, divide. And we're going to call them add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And so here we can just add the division, multiply is a star, subtract is a minus, and add is a plus. So now if I save this and I come back over to our calculator and refresh the page, you'll see we've got our add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So I'm actually going to get rid of this because that was just to help me remember. And we'll run the tests, and it looks like we've got another test passing. And so it should contain an clickable element containing a decimal point with a corresponding ID of decimal. Okay, so we're just going to basically do another one of these. And it should say decimal. And then here we'll put a point there. And if I save that, refresh the page, run the tests, it looks like we've got another one passing. And it should have a clickable element with an ID of clear. All right, so we'll do that, and we'll call this one for clear. We can make it warning, a warning text, right? So button warning, button block, button warning, and here we'll just call this one clear. And if I save this and go back to our calculator and refresh, run the tests, we see we've got 6 of 16. So it should contain element to display values with a corresponding ID of display. Now this one's a little different. We want to make it so that there is just an element with a display ID on it. So this isn't going to be one of our buttons. So here we can make a display section. So we'll go div class, we'll just call div and then ID of display. Yeah, and then I think that you can do background colors, right? Background color. So here we could go background info, BG info. And we set that as a class here. And if we save this and we go back over to here, refresh, it doesn't look like we have anything. So perhaps we want to have some sort of, if we put a space in there, do we see it? I'm not sure. Display. Okay, cool. And we could go text center, text white. And if we save that and refresh the page, you can see it's sort of bigger there. And that'll be good for now. This is what our display will look like for the time being. We can make a margin on the top and the bottom. So margin Y is equal to 5. That should, maybe padding, not margin. That gives us some space there. And then we could do some margin as well. On the top and the bottom, maybe a margin of 3, which makes it so it's separated from the space a little bit. And we've got our big display here. So yeah, that gives us our display. Now, so if we run the test, we've got 7 of 16. At any time, pressing the clear button clears the input and the output values and returns the calculator to its initial state. 0 should be shown in the element with the ID of display. Okay, well, I wonder if we even just put 0 in here to start with, if that would cause that test to pass. But my guess is it won't. Okay, but it's good. It's passing now. We know that our clear button's not actually causing it to clear, but we're passing the test. So we might as well just keep moving through the tests until we get to a point where we actually need to write the logic. So as I input numbers, I should be able to see my input in the element with the ID of display. Cool. So this is a tricky one because now we're actually doing something. Right now when we click 1, when we click 2, and we click 3, things should be showing up here, but they're not. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we could do is let's just practice how we could do it. So I'm right-clicking and pressing the inspect element, and I'm going to go to the console. And so here in the console, what we can do is we can practice getting them. And so if we were to look at this, we know that this has the ID of display, and we can know that there's a get element by ID thing. So we can go document, which gets us the whole document, and we say get element by ID. This is just some vanilla JavaScript, and we can say display. And now I'm just testing. What does this get us? Well, this gets us the display tab. Okay, cool. So what we could do in our code is call this, we could say let display equal this. And then we could do something like display.innerText is equal to, let's say, useful programmer. Now this is just an example, but yeah, this shows us that we can use JavaScript to increment our display, right? Cool. Well, with each of these buttons, we want them to be able to execute a function, right? So maybe right before here, we could just go, yeah. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this in Atom. If you're not going to do it in Atom, you'll want to just do it like this. On click, we can execute a function, right? And within here, we can write a JavaScript function. So we could do one called update display. This is a function we're going to create, and we can put a I think we can pass in the integer of 0 to here. And we want to do this all the way down. So if I just copy this, I can use command click to do a multi-selector. Oops. Oh, okay, so command click. And just add it into each of the numbers. And then press Command V. Oh, weird. Looks like I forgot to put the thing in there. Okay, and then what we want to do is just go down here and pass these in, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9. And then now we can make a JavaScript thing. So we can set our update display up here. So in the head, we can create our script, and then we can add some of our own custom JavaScript in here. So we can call this, we can actually name this function. So we can say function update display, and then we're going to say we'll just call this number. And then in here we can say console.log, and we'll just log the number. So if I save this and I refresh this page, when I click 0, 1, and 2, it's showing up in the console. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? We could say if we go update display, really what all this does is console logs whatever we pass in as a parameter. So you'll see that it console logs useful programmer here. Well, how can we make this more interesting? Well, we know we've got display set here, right? Because we said let display equal document.getElement by ID. So we can set our display here. We say let the display, and then we can say display.innerhtml, which is the same thing we would do over here. Display.innerhtml equals up. Then you'll see that it changed here. And so what we can do is say display.innerhtml is equal to the number. Okay, so now if we save this and refresh this page, if we go 0, 1, 2, you'll see our display is reflecting our changes here. But it's not going 1, 2, 3. It's actually just repeating it with 0, with 1, 2, and 3. And so we want it to be, we want it to increment, right? And so that's what we need to figure out how to do. How do we make it so that there is some sort of a persistence to the data? We could just add to the display if we were to go like that and refresh the page. 0, 1, 2, 3. All right, well now we've got, I mean, it's not perfect, but it definitely is sort of doing what we wanted to in the tests. Let's see if what we've got here succeeds in the tests. Should clear. The calculation with the corresponding ID. At pressing the clear button, the input and output values return the calculator and initialize a state. 0 should be shown and the element with the ID of display. So what they're saying right now is that if you press clear, we should update the display with 0. But right now you can see nothing happens when we click clear. Okay, so let's go down to clear. And so with the clear button, we see that it's right here. We can say on click, we can say clear display. Okay, and now if we save this, well, nothing's going to happen yet, right? Because we need to create a clear display function. So function clear display. And I don't think we actually need to do any parameters, but what we can do is just say the display, the Innerhtml is equal to 0. And so if we save this and now we refresh the page here, we can go 1, 2, 3. And then if we go clear, we see that the display has gone to 0. So let's see if we run the tests. It looks like we're passing another one. So number 7, we've completed. As I input numbers, I should be able to see my input in the element with the ID of display. Okay, so it says numbers do not display correctly within display. Expected 0, 1, 2, 3 to equal 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is the expected value. This is what they got, and this is what they ended up with. So what we want to do is we don't want the 0 here initially. So we don't want the initial 0 state to be there. So 0, they're saying 1, 2, 3. They want it to just be 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, what we could do, right here, if we console.log the display.innerhtml, let's get rid of the console logging the number now. And now if I come over here, inspect, refresh the page, and go 1, 2, 3, you'll see that initially we have 0. So what we could say is, we can make an if statement here, right? If display.innerhtml is equal to 0, then display.innerhtml is equal to the number, which means we're not adding it to. And then if it's not equal to 0, then we want to just add to it. So if I save this here and I refresh the page here and we go 1, 2, 3, it did not work. Display.innerhtml. So let's say console.log display.innerhtml. So if I save this, refresh the page, and click the 1, you'll see there. So the console log, it's reading 0. Let's say type of. That'll give me the type because maybe I'm getting a string of 0. So I'm going to refresh this and say 0. It's a string. Okay, so it's being passed in as a string. So what we need to do is check to see if the inner display is equal to 0. So now if I refresh the page, we've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, why did it pass it in there twice? Is equal to the number. Oh, okay, so we need to make this an else statement because what happened is it said, yeah, it's equal to 0, so it set the number equal to 1 because that was the first one that I clicked, and then it added a number there. So we need to make an else statement here, and then move this guy into here. That way, only one runs at a time. So now if I save this and I refresh the page, we should go 1, 2, 3. We've got it showing up the way that it's supposed to. Awesome. And if we run the tests now, it looks like we've got one passing. So I'm going to close the console for now. As I input numbers, I should be able to see my input in the element with the ID of display. Cool. So we're past that one. In any order, I should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide a chain of numbers of any length when I hit the equals. The correct result should be shown in the element with the ID of display. So we want to be able to say 3 plus 5 times 6 minus 2 divided by 4. And so that we don't have right now, right? If we go 3 plus 5, we have 35. And then if we press equals, nothing happens. And this should be 8 at this point, the way that we're doing it. So how do we think about creating the logic for that to work? Okay, well, before we do that, let's clean it up so that this is just a little bit easier to read. Right now, we've got, in order for us to hit the clear button, we've got to scroll down and then scroll up. We might as well throw these into rows. We've already made the container, the fluid container here. And so once you get your container, the next thing you do is you create a row. Class is equal to row. And so we'll put our h1 element, we'll do text center. So we'll center our h1 element in its own row. And I think we should actually put this in a column as well. Because this is just a pattern of Bootstrap. You go container, a row, and then within that you have a certain number of columns. So now if we refresh the page, we see, yeah, this is a little bit more centered. I think this looks a little bit better. And so this is our first row, and now we want our second row to be the display. And I kind of want the display to be in a column as well. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're just going to do the same thing and set this guy in its own row. In its own row and its own column. And so now if I save that and refresh, nothing really changes here because we already have it set up this way. We can actually get rid of the text center here now because it's duplicate code. So if I refresh the page, you'll see we still got 0. We still have 0. So yeah, the next thing I want to do now is I'm going to create the next row, and let's only put 0, 1, 2 into it. And then we'll put this also within a column. Okay, and then I just close those divs up. So this is the div for there and the div for there. And so we've got 3 there. And so if we refresh the page, let's see, yeah. Okay, now we want to make the column -4. So that means it's going to take up 4 of 12 units. And now if we refresh the page, cool, now they're over here. And so we're going to do this a few times. We want some more 4 columns though, because what we can do this 3 times. So we can go div column 4, and so now we have 4, 8, 12, and Bootstrap is just has 12 unit increments. And so now we can take 3, 4, and 5, move them up to 4, and then 6, 7, 8, and 9, 8, and move them up to this guy as well. If I save this now, we have pretty much our numbers set up in a grid-like format. And so, yeah, I mean, I can actually just move 9. I'm just doing this roughly for now because there's no need to go overboard right now with this. And then we'll just do equals and clear in this row. So if I go move equals up to here, and then I move clear up to here, we have equal amounts of space. And yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 more increments to go. And yeah, so I guess that's good for now. And then we can do another row here. So div class is equal to row, and we'll just keep it with the text center. I'm not sure we need that right now. And then if we move these guys up, now they're in a separate row, so our spacing should be fixed here. No, it needs to be in a column. And so one thing that Bootstrap can do is you can go div class is equal to call, and then this will just cause them to be equally spaced out. So I can close that div and then create a new one. And then, yeah, that's how I can get this going. We can just close the div, open the div, and then make a space, close the div, open the div, make a space, close the div, open the div, and then we want to close the div. And now if I save this, we should have these guys all on their separate rows. And the spacing is messed up here. Column. So what I want to do here is on the row, the text center, I want to just say padding top is equal to 3. And if I save this, that should give us some spacing in these elements. So now our calculator is a little bit cleaner looking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And 0. 9, 8. Okay, cool. And so our display is working, but we still don't have that functionality. But we do have a little bit cleaner looking code, and that is pretty nice. So I'm just going to clean up the spacing up here as well. We don't need these comments anymore. And just working towards keeping their code nice and pretty. I'm going to move this up to the top because I think the title at the top works well. And so now if I save this and I refresh, we have what's looking like a little bit more of an organized calculator. Okay, cool. So now let's get back to the tests. If we run the tests on the JavaScript calculator, we see our next thing is that we need to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and chain numbers together. When I hit the equals, the correct result should be the element of ID of display. So 3 plus 5, it should essentially get us to 8. And the way that I want to do it is when we say 3 plus 5, the display immediately clicks over to 8 because we're going to be doing the formulaic one. So this is going to work out to be 11.5 for us rather than doing it in the scientific way, which would make it so it would work out to here. Because if you were to do it this way, in the scientific way, this would become 30, this would become 0.5, this would become, and then I think, yeah, then you'd have to worry about the order of operation between plus and subtract. But we're not going to do it that way. We're going to just do it the straightforward way of 3 plus 5. So let's look at it right now, what's happening. If I come over here and I go to 3, and I go plus 5, and then I say equals, we just get 35. So if you go into the console, I'm going to refresh the page and say 3 plus 5. It's passing in a string each time. So each time we click one of these buttons, we're passing in the type of a string, and then it's with this guy. And so what we want to do now is kind of come up with a plan for what happens when we hit these increment or these action keys or whatever. So right now, when we look over back to our code, we see that there's no on-click action for any of these guys. So what I'm thinking is we'll just pass in a string, and that describes what they do. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to create a multi-click thing by pressing Command and then Tab. If you can't do that, don't worry about it. You can just go in and do it manually. But basically, I'm just adding an on-click element to each of these. And then here, where I'm just going to write in, we're going to pass in a string. And we want to make it single quotes so that it fits within here. So this is decimal. And here we're going to pass in divide. And you can see it matches here, and it's the divide key that we see. And then here we'll pass in multiply. And we want to make sure we're using single quotes. Here I'm going to pass in subtract. Subtract. And then here we'll pass in add. So this is actually the first one that we're going to want to use. And so if we do the update display and we come up here, we see, well, if we click the add button, it won't render here, and it won't render to the else statement. So we can just create an else if statement here. And then we'll have to pass in a, and so right now we've got, if our inner HTML is equal to nothing, we're going to have a number here. So actually, I think if we were to save this and refresh the page over here, if we were to just start with plus, update display is not defined. Update display. DATEDISPLAY. You update display. Did I misspell it? Update display is not defined. Why on earth would it be saying that? Let's refresh this page. Unexpected syntax error. I'm checking to see if there's any decimal errors in here. And then I'm going to come up here. Okay, so we're probably just getting an error in this. So let's just say number is equal to add, because that's pretty much where I'm going. And then I'm going to just console.log. We are adding. Okay, so if I save this and I refresh the page, if I click plus, you'll see that it changes this to add. Now that screws us up, right? So we want to say, we don't want the things to get triggered if the thing's equal to 0. So we could say, and, well, for now we'll just go display.innerHTML is not equal to add. So now if I save this and I refresh the page and I start with the plus sign, we should have gotten the add button here. We are adding. Okay. So what I need to actually make this, instead of and, it needs to be or. So if I save that and refresh the page, and now if I start with add, we can get into the we are adding. Display is equal to 0 or that. Anyways, we'll just deal with that later. So if I clear and we go 3 plus, now what you see we are adding, and then 5, we have a situation now where it's sort of working. So else if the number is equal to add, so this, we should actually change this. Number is no longer a useful thing. We should call this input, right? So if we save that and refresh, do we still have the 3, 5 capacity? 4, 5. Okay, this is actually causing it to break. Well, let's just leave it for now. We won't deal with we'll deal with the thing, with the situation where if we do the add initially, then we'll deal with that first. So right now we've got 3, 5. We can do that. If we clear it, we can still have 3 and 5. So 3 plus 5. Okay, but we see that we console logged we are adding in here, just incrementally. So this is where we want to do it. So if we were to clear again, we say 3 and then plus, and we see we are adding triggered again. So what do we want to do here? Well, I want to create a overall variable. I'm going to call it, we're going to say trailing calculation, our trailing result. And we'll just set this equal to 0 for now. And so when we get to here, what we can do is say right here we've got the add. And so what we can do is say display.Interhtml. That's going to give us 3 at the time, right? So if I were to console log here, and then I'm thinking about making this our trailing result. So if I save that and refresh the page, 3, and then I'm going to say plus, our trailing result is 3. So when we can set our trailing result to be equal to the current display when we select the add. We also want to make the display.Interhtml is equal to 0. So then that makes it so that the display is equal to 0. And then we can save that. And now if we were to, at the end of here, we console.log our trailing result. Then we'll see that we should have 3 saved in the calculator. So I'm going to refresh and say 3 plus 5. And then I should be able to say equals, and it will have 8. So right now our trailing result's 3, and 5 is our other result. But when we press equals, nothing happens. So yeah, I guess we could do, if we know the else if statement, and if we could say equals, because we know our equals button is going to, where's the equals button? Our equals button is on the first row. So here we've got our on click, but we don't have anything here. So we need to make an equals button. So on click, we're going to say update display with an equals sign, right? So we're going to pass in the string of equals. So now if I save that, when we press the equals button, we should be dealing with an equals situation. So now our display.Interhtml should be equal to our trailing result plus our display.Interhtml. And we also want to set our trailing result to be equal to, we want to make our trailing result now equal to the display.Interhtml. Okay, and then I'm just going to console log this things in here too, so we can say our trailing result, and I'm just making an arrow here so we can see, and then we'll also have our display.Interhtml, and we'll just make a little string in here to make it so we can visibly see what's going on in the console. So now if I save this and refresh the page, I should be able to go 3 plus 5 equals. Okay, cool. So we've got 35, but we've got a trailing result of 3 and 5. Now, so what we're having a problem with here is that we're not making these integers, right? So right now, if I go, now we've got this saved here as well. So trailing result. Well, if we go type of, type of our trailing result, we see type, not tripe. We see that it's a string. So what we need to do is get trailing result to be an integer, right? Integer to float. Okay, so we want to go JavaScript, convert to convert string to integer. Okay, so parse float is probably what we want to do. Cool. So let's go back to here, and we can just say Parsefloat is not a function. I think we can go string.parsefloat. Okay, we're gonna have to come back and look at this. Converts a string into a point number. So let's see, parse int text 4210 returns 10. Point number, parse float of text. So all you do is say parse float and then you pass the text in. So instead of string.parsefloat, we just say parsefloat there. Okay, and yeah, right now our trailing result has been set to 35, so that's good. So now what we want to do is just parse the floats within the function. So when we hit the equals thing, our Innerhtml becomes the parsed float of that time plus the parsed float of this. And now if we refresh the page and we go 3 plus 5 and then we do equals, railing result is not defined. Okay, so trailing result. So I'll save this and refresh the page and go 3 plus 5 equals, and we've got 8. So now we've got a trailing result and it's working for the plus symbol. So yeah, let's see. If we run the tests, we have 10 passing. In any order, I should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So we're only getting 3 plus 5. So this, once we get 3 plus 5, we want the computer should be able to say 8 times 6. And right now we don't have anything working. So this is else if equals is with the plus sign. So we're really not doing it correctly. We need to come up with a way to know whether or not we're adding, subtracting, or dividing. Okay, well, if we want to find out whether we're adding, we don't want just input to be equal to add, we want it to be all of them. So we could just create an array that stores all of our operand options, right? So we could say operation options. And we can set this equal to an array of strings and just have them equal to all of our different ones. So we've got equals here. So this is basically going to be strings that are not the numbers, right? So anytime we have it there. So equals is 1. We've got add, subtract, multiply, divide, and decimal. I'm just going to create a line here and just get this prepared. Divide, multiply. Oops. Subtract and add. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep it here. This is just to make this a little bit quicker. And now I'm going to cut that out of there. And now I have these guys all lined up. I can come back up to here and add all of our operand operations options here. And now let me take this. I take all our operand operations. And then if we go Command-Shift-I and I go to the console, if we set the operation options here, well, we can just say, I think we can go equals dot index of the operation options. Okay, so maybe the opposite. We want it to be operation options dot index of, and then we pass in equals. So this gets us a 0. -1 means it's not there. So now what we're saying is if the equals is 1 and then decimal, equals is decimal. Equals is 0, decimal is 1, divide is that. And so now we know that if the input being passed in has an index of the operation greater than or equal to 0, then we know we're going to be dealing with an operation option. So instead of saying if the input is equal to this one, what we want to say is else if the operation options dot index of, and the input is greater than greater than or equal to 0, and then I can just say console.log, and then I'm just going to write in a little hint here. We're dealing with a operation. Okay, so now if I save that and refresh the page, when we hit equals, we don't see it initially. Dealing with an operation. Plus. dealing with an operation. It only happens the first time. So what we might want to say, if the display is equal to this and the operation index, if we're dealing with a number, if it's not equal to -1, no, wait. If it's greater than or equal to, we actually want to say if it's not equal to -1. So if it's a operation option. So now if I save this, we should see, when I refresh the page, we should be getting dealing with an operation. We're not dealing with an operation each time. Index is equal. It's not equal to -1. We should never actually get this guy passing through. Oh, you know what? I'm console logging down here. Let's get rid of this. Let's just say, if we console log down here, we just want to say failed to get picked up in if statement. So if I save that and refresh, equals, failed to get picked up in an if statement. Plus, we're dealing with an operand. Negative, failed to get picked up in the statement. Times, dealing with operand. Okay, so this actually isn't working the way that I thought it would be. So I'm going to get rid of that, refresh the page. So now we go plus, nothing happened when we hit plus initially. The display inner input is equal to this, and this, well, the operating option, this should be there. So, oh, we actually set this to and. So the Innerhtml was set to the input. So this isn't working. So we want to say the Innerhtml is equal to 0, and the operation options dot index of the input should be, no, this should be equal to -1. So now if we refresh the page and go minus, we're dealing with an operation. Times, dealing with an operation. Divide, dealing with an operation. Okay, so now we're passing this in properly. And so I think what we can do, let's see here. Yeah, here what we want to do is save our operation to the working with. So let's create another variable. So the operation, the working operation, let's call that. I'm going to set this equal to an empty string for now. So yeah, our working operation is set to an empty string. And so if we pass in here, we're dealing with an operation. Well, equals is an operation. I think that we should remove equals from here. We don't want equals to be part of this. We want to treat equals in a separate way. And instead of adding it together, we're just going to have to come together with some sort of a thing. So our working operation. So if our input is a operation, then we want to say, well, I guess what we want to say is we want to set our working operation to be equal to the input. We want our inner HTML to be set to 0, so we basically clear the inner HTML. But we want to set our trailing result to be equal to the inner HTML. And then we have our working operation saved, so if it's divide or whatever, or plus, we've got it saved as our working operation. And so here, instead of, well, we can still console log this stuff, but let's also add our working operation. Working operation. And these console logs are just so I can see what's happening. So if I save that and refresh the page over here, we should be able to go 1 plus 1 equals. And then here we've got our working operation, our display inner HTML, and our trailing result. And we also have the working operation tells us what we want to do and the two numbers that we're working with to do it, to get 1 plus 1. And then here, what we probably want to do is just have a new function. And we could call this function calculate. Calculate. And here we're going to take in a first number, a second number, and an operation. Okay, cool. So I'm going to get this here. And instead of adding, we're going to say our display.innerhtml is equal to calculate our first number plus our second number plus our operation. But we don't want to call it operation. We want to say it's our working operation. So we're passing in three numbers. First, the trailing result parsed. Second, the display result parsed. And then our working operation. And so down here, we can probably do a switch statement, right? If I go JavaScript switch statement. I'm just looking it up so it's nice and quick. I can copy the example in. Okay. So what we want this to be is we want to switch for our operation. And in the case that it's an add, I think we need to, in the case that it's equal to add, we want to say our result, we're going to say let result equal a string. What we're going to do is just say our result is equal to the first number plus the second number. And then at the end of this, we're going to return the result. And so right now, add should work. I'm going to make it, well, we don't even have to define it, I don't think. Result.toString. So we get the result. If it's 1 plus 1, result becomes equal to 2. We return 2 to string. And so our Innerhtml returns the string value. So let's go back over here and see if we can do 1 plus 1 equals. 1 plus 1 equals 2. And then can we do plus 5 to get 7? Can. Cool. Now, nothing else is going to work, right? Minus 4 is not going to work right now because y is not defined. Reference error, y is not defined, calculate. Oh, case of y. Okay, so now what we want to do is create a bunch of other case statements for each one. And you know what? I'm just going to set the result equal to the first, console.log. If it turns out that we don't hit it with all our operands, I want to have a case in here that gives me a hint as to what's happening. Calculate switch statement missed something. Okay. And then we just return an undefined result. And so the next case would be subtract. No. Add. We could be subtract. In which case the result is going to be this minus. Another case would be subtract, multiply, multiply. And if we do that, we want to multiply them. And if it's not multiply, it might be divide. First number divided by the second number. Okay, so now if I save this and we refresh the page, we should be able to go 3 plus 5 equals 8. And yeah, let's run the tests now. Oh, it looks like we've passed another test. So as I input numbers, I should be able to see my input in the display. In order, I should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide a chain of numbers and hit the equals button. The correct result shown should be the element to display. 3 plus 5 times 6 minus 2 divided by 4. Cool. And I'm just going to save this for now. Nobody will even be able to see it. I'm just wanting to be able to see what happens on our calculator. If I refresh the page, and I'm just reading from here, 3 plus 5 times 6 minus 2 divided by 4 equals. We get 0.5. So what I'm thinking is happening is as we iterate through here, we're not actually causing it to thing. So what's happening here is we're saying if the first time we're doing this, we're setting the working operation and we're just saying the trailing result is equal to the display. And so we kind of want to have a two-way system here. The first time that we get into here, what we're assuming here is that we have a working operand. So else if we put in an operation and the working operation is equal to empty string, meaning it's the first time that we do that. No, because we're just checking to see if we're doing it there. I want to keep this. Working operation is equal to a string. So I'm going to get rid of it here, but now I'm going to say inside of this else if statement, now we're dealing with an operation. And what if we say if the working operation is equal to blank, meaning we don't have one, then we'll do one thing. Then we can do this guy. We can do the working operation is equal to the input. Our trailing result is equal to this because we know this is the first time that we've done it. And then we display 0. Cool. Now, what happens? This is what if we... so we're dealing with an initial operand. And then we can say else. This means we're dealing without an operand. Dealing with a set operand. And so if we're dealing with a set operand, what we want to do is make the trailing result equal to the calculation of the first. Yeah, so our operation is going to be set to our working operation. And our first number is going to be set to our trailing result. And our second number is going to be set to our display.Interhtml. So our trailing result is the calculation of that. And then we want to set our display to be equal to our trailing result. Yeah, because when we hit the plus button, we want our trailing result to have the value calculated in it. Our trailing result plus, no. Our trailing result is equal to, so if we go 1 plus 1 plus, then we want it to be at 2. So yeah, our display, our inner result is equal to trailing result. And then we want to set our working operand to be equal to an empty string. If it's there, we want to, and then we want to set it to 1 plus 1 plus, no, then we want to set it to our working operand to be set to our input. So yeah, let's see where that puts us. So I saved that, and I'm refreshing the page over here. So 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus. Okay, so what we're having is a problem with our operations. I'm looking at this, and you can see here, when we calculate it, we're passing in these numbers as parsed floats, and whereas here we're passing them in as strings. So I think that it makes more sense to do the parse floating inside and just work with strings when we're outside of the calculate. So we can just say, here we can say that the first number is equal to the parse float of the first number, and second number is equal to the parse float of the second number. Cool. Now let's save that and then refresh over here. What happens if we go 1 plus, oops. Okay, I'm just going to refresh. Go 1 plus 1 equals 2 plus plus plus. Okay, so what's happening now is we're not recording, we're not setting our trailing result. So I think actually what we want to do, display.innerText input equals. So what's happening there is I'm hitting the working operation. The working operation should be set back to an empty string. So let's refresh the page and go 1 plus 1. And then when we go plus, it should be 2. And we should be able to do 2. But then when I do that, and then if I go equals, we get a total to string of undefined. Doesn't work. Calculate trailing result. Yeah, so our working operation, trailing result, display. Here we set it to 0. Here we set R. Otherwise, if we did plus, we want our working operation to be set to the input. And I'm just going to do it in the same order here. Our trailing result should be set to our calculation of the trailing result and the display of Innerhtml. Yeah, so our trailing result should be set to the calculation of it. No, here we need to make sure we do our Innerhtml. Here we need to say we're calculating it. And then the display.innerhtml should be equal to the trailing result. Display.innerhtml. Okay, so let's throw a console log in here. We can keep the dealing with an operation. And let's just log, instead of logging this out here, I'll add this up to here. So each time we update the display, we'll see what's going on. So when I refresh the page, I can say 3 plus 5. And so we have a trailing result of 3. Our display Innerhtml is equal to nothing. But you know what? That's probably just because my console log shouldn't be on this side. So I'm going to get it out of there, and I'm actually just going to do it right at the end so that it has the updated information. So refresh the page. So 3, our trailing result's 3. Our Innerhtml, no, our Innerhtml's 3. We haven't set any trailing result, and our working operation is a blank. So if we go plus, then our trailing result's 5. Our Innerhtml is 0, and our working operation is an add. And then I say 3 plus 5. Now we've got that working. And so now if I were to say plus, our trailing result is equal to 8. Our display on our Innerhtml is equal to 8. And our working operation is equal to blank is equal to add. And so now if I go 2, now that's the problem right there. So our display.innerhtml is equal to 8. It's not equal to 0. So perhaps what I should do, instead of saying our inner display, we should set this to 0. And then we could create another display area like maybe our secondary display. So we can say let secondary display equal secondary display. And then we need to create the secondary display. So we've got our display here and then our secondary display. And we can call this with the background of warning. No, let's call it secondary. And we've got the space in here. And instead of setting our inner display equal to that, we could set our secondary display dot inner HTML equal to our trailing result. Okay, so now let's save that and refresh. Let's see what happens. For some reason, our JavaScript didn't work, which means it tells me that I probably made a mistake somewhere. But let's give it a try. Let's go 3 plus 5 plus. Okay, so now we've got 8. 3 plus 5 is equal to 8. And in the tests, I think we go divide by something, or no, multiply by 2. Let's say, so this should be 16. And we've got a mistake again. 3 plus 5. Oh, yeah, I've got it up here. Okay, so we've got another problem with this guy. Let's see. I want to make the secondary display work a little bit better in here. So instead of doing them both in the same column, I'll make this one a column of 8. And our secondary display will go in a column of 2. So it's kind of off to the side. Oops. Yeah, just like that. And now if I save that, it works. Okay, so 8 and 2 doesn't work. I want to make it 10 and 2 because they should sum up to 12. All right, so let's try this again. So 1 plus 1 plus, our secondary display is working now. 1 plus 1 plus 4. Okay, so plus is working. So minus 4 minus 4 minus 4 minus, that's working, times 3. Okay, that's not working, times. So why is 3 multiplying it not working? Okay, anyways, I'm not really sure where I should go with this right now, so what I'm going to do is just move some stuff around. I'm going to get this out of the head area and just put it in here. And instead of making this H1, I'm going to make it an H4, so it's just smaller. And then I'm going to run the tests. And we've got 10 passing. And I should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide a chain of commands. So this should come out to 11.5. So let's try to figure out where it's breaking. So it should go 3 plus 5. Oh, wow. What happened there? Refresh. Okay. 3 plus 5 times 3 plus 5. Okay, and we multiplied 3 plus 5, so we got 15. So there's something going wrong in our logic up here. We're dealing with an operation. Let's see what happened in the console. If I log this, initially our trailing result was 0, 3, and we had nothing there, so we're dealing with an operation. So this is when I put 3, and then we had a trailing result. Our display was equal to that, and we had an add, and then 3 and 5. And then I hit the add again, so we were dealing with an operation, and for some reason it multiplied it. So let's go down here, first number, add, subtract, multiply, divide. Let's go, I'm just going to console.log, add, calculated. And I'm going to do that for each one of these. Cool. And now if I refresh the page, let's say 3 plus, dealing with an operation. Nothing was calculated yet, so we didn't get that. 5. And then when we hit times, what's happened is we've multiplied it together. And so the working operation wasn't equal to this. Our working operation turned into the input too early. So I don't need this to happen first. That was a mistake when I moved it up there. So our trailing result should be the calculation of it. We set our secondary result to the trailing result, and our inner display is equal to 0. Okay, so messing with that screwed me up. So now let's refresh the page and see what happens again. So 3 plus 5 times, cool, we've got 8. So now we want to multiply it times 6. Multiply it times 6. That's 8 times 6. 48. So when I do minus, it should be 48. Cool. And then 2. 48 minus 2 should be 46. And then divided by 4. 4, which would be 11 and a half. 11.5. Oh, wow. All right, let's run the tests. Looks like something happened. I should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide a chain of numbers of any length when I hit an equal sign. The correct result should be shown in the ID display. So here they say this is the expression. It should produce 32.5 or 11.5 as an answer. The expression 3 plus 5 times 6 times 2 should produce that, depending on the logic. But what did it produce? Because it seems to have produced it for me. Okay, look at this. We're getting this weird trailing result. Oh, look, so we can actually see the tests run. So if I run the tests now, it'll show me what happened. It failed on this guy. And here's where they did the math. So trailing result is 32.9. Wow, okay. So here they started off with 5. Display Innerhtml 1. Dealing with operand. Multiply calculated. 5. Dealing with an operation. They add calculated. 10, 9. And then they added 10 and 9 together. And they got 92 for somehow. Add calculated. 102 is the trailing result. And then they added 1. 1, 2, 12. All right, so this is a weird one because when we run the tests, maybe what's happening is when they're pressing the equal sign, something's happening. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm just going to go 3 plus 5, and then hit equals, and then times 6 equals 3 plus 5 times 6, that's 8, 16. Okay, so this is what's happening. Something's wrong. Multiply calculated. So I'm thinking when I hit the equal sign, something incorrect happens. Display Innerhtml. The trailing result is equal to that. And here I'm guessing we should say our working operand should be set to an empty string. So perhaps that's what's going on. So let's refresh the page and say 3 plus 5 equals 8. And then we go times 6 equals. And that should be 48. Minus 2 should be 46. And then divide by 4 should be 11.5. All right, well, this seems to be working. I hope that was what was going on. Awesome, 11 tests have passed. That means we're past this next one. So now we want to deal with decimals. You want to be able to perform any operations. For some reason, we're failing that with the decimals, so we might be able to fix that with the decimals. And if 2 or more operators are entered consecutively, the operation performed by the last one, excluding the negative sign. So there's another one, pressing an operator immediately following equals should start a new calculation that operates on the result of the previous evaluation. And we should be able to deal with decimals out to 4 places. So this video is currently around an hour long, and I'm going to stop here for the purposes of this one and break it into a greater than 1 part series. So hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in part 2.